Hello, everyone. I'm Kalani Kachela, or XK, for any visitors. Hey, Tom, so you're waving. Glad to have everybody back this evening. And if we have any newcomers, welcome. Tonight, we're going to continue with our series, Living Your Best UU Life. And tonight, we're going to explore the theme of talent, living into your talent. And this will be, again, tied into stewardship. Next slide. Okay, for our agenda tonight, this follows the previous session on Tuesday. We're going to talk about how talent and spirituality are linked, and we're going to explore how to identify your gifts and graces, and then look at talent as a path to stewardship. Slide. All right, let's do a quick review from Tuesday night. We talked about time and stewardship and how those two tie together. And we had a few key points that we identified. And by the way, we have that first session on the UUCLC website if you want to go back and review that. But here are the highlights of that session. First is to be aware that we all have limited time. And you can squeeze more time, but still there are limits to how much time you have in the day for yourself. Worrying about time hijacks your brain. And by that, I mean you become preoccupied with time and how little time you have, or what you have to get done, or what you haven't gotten done. So organizing your time is a way to get over that. Worrying about your time also robs you of your spiritual bliss, a term that came from Joseph Campbell. I think he was also made famous by the spiritual teacher Ram Dass. Because you are so immersed with time, it's hard to find joy sometimes. Getting a hold of your time allows you to be present in the moment. So the more organized your time is, and the better structure you have around time, you don't have to worry about what's happening in the past or what's happening in the future. You can just focus on the present. We talked about the different time horizons, and we used the model from David Allen from getting things done. He talked about the horizons that begin at the 50,000 feet level and come down to the runway, which is your list of tasks that you have open. We want to encourage you to manage your list, and you can have lists for personal time, for professional time, for however you want to break it down. But by having a list of things that you have to complete and the next action steps, that gives you a sense of control and structure over the time you have. And then tying it to spiritual practice is important, and that leads us to the stewardship issue of making time for church. And we did some exercises to help people figure out a way to dedicate time to church. Any questions from the previous session that have come up since then? Any leftovers? Okay, let's go into the next slide, Michaela. So today we're talking about talent, and I use the term gifts and graces. It was the term that I heard a lot when I was in seminary and when I was in my clinical training, as a way to help people figure out where they want to spend their time and how they want to use their life and focus their ministry. And my mentors in ministry often use this term as a way of helping us go through formation. And the idea was that we all have been given or born with or live into or discover talents that we have that can be used for the benefit of the greater good, or for humankind, or for your community, for your family, for your life, for your church. Next slide. So there are a lot of books out there, and a lot of people talk about finding your gifts, and particularly your spiritual gifts. I have here just a image that has 10 commitments that talk about values. And often you can tie gifts to a certain value that you hold dear to yourself. There are several here: critical thinking, empathy, responsibility, environmentalism, humility. And all these can be tied to any array of one's life purpose. And often I hear people say, well, I don't know what my gifts are, and I don't know what I'm good at, or how can I serve the church, or how can I serve the community? And often I believe what they're asking is, how do I figure out what I'm put on earth to do? What was I born to do? And I don't know that that's a easy question to answer. I believe it takes a lot of discernment, reflection, and time. And there are many ways to go at it. Next slide. So I have an assumption out there that everyone has talents for the world. And these talents can consist of, you could be just a fabulous friend. You could make people laugh. You could be a writer. You can be a preacher, medicine. You can teach, mothering, parenting, being a good father. I think my family, my parents in particular, were really good at having friendships. And I just grew up with seeing my parents always having friends over or going to visit friends. In fact, they were so tied to their friends after my parents, after my parents divorced, we would go to my dad's house a lot. And almost every weekend we were over there, we would spend some time where he would say, let's go. And we'd jump in the car and he'd go to his brother's house. And my sister and I would just sit there for an hour or two, just watching them talk. And it would be the most boring thing in the world for us because we just were sitting there and there was nothing for us to do. Or he'd go to his close friend's house and they'd sit around and talk. Or somebody would come to my dad's house and they'd sit around and talk. But it was this thing around friendship that helped me understand that part of my gift is to be a friend to others. And I have a lot of really close friends. So I believe everybody has such a talent. Many people around us in the church, for example, sing. They play instruments. Catherine has said that when she's held these workshops for the musicians in the church, during COVID, there were so many people that came. They were in the sanctuary space, they were in the breezeway, they were down the back of my office, they were just all over. So many people have this gift of being able to play music. So this is kind of what I'm getting at is there are many ways, as Rumi says, to kiss the ground. I mean, that's one way of saying there's many ways for us to love the world and give our gift back to the world. And it takes discernment and reflection to discover what your talents are and what your gifts and graces are. So this class, we're going to spend more time with yourself, thinking and reflecting and discerning about what your gifts are. And then we're also going to do some small group conversation so that people can share what they've learned about themselves with the others. Next slide. There's several books out there that are really great at helping you identify what your talent is and what your skill set is, and perhaps you may have a natural propensity to do well, or something that, to me, I believe, would feel less like work than, say, having fun or just doing things that you love. Some of the books that are listed here, a couple of them you may probably know right off the bat. What Color is Your Parachute is kind of one of these things that gets renewed every year. I can't tell you how many editions there are, What Color is Your Parachute, but it has evolved over the decades. It's a ongoing bestseller, and it helps you talk about, figure out what your vocation is. This next book, Stephen Rice, is one that I like that may not be as well known, and it helps people figure out some of the core aspects of the personality that can then help them figure out what they can do well and understand, how they're motivated to act in the world. Howard Thurman's book, Gifts of the Spirit, is just a fantastic book that talks about spiritual gifts. Joyce Rupp's book, The Cup of Our Spiritual Life, is a book that has kind of a structure around meditations and journaling and answering a variety of big questions to kind of help you figure out where your spiritual purpose lies. And the last one, by Joe Dispenza, on silence, is one that I like because the book is really about a practice of just being alone with yourself with total silence and letting your mind kind of wonder where it goes. And out of that practice, you can learn more about yourself and the things that move you. And he says that out of silence, you can just become more in touch with who you are. And I think for the most part, all these are different takes on how do I learn where my gifts are, where my talents are. And if you take them to the next step, like we got with getting things done, then you would say, well, how can I put this knowledge or discernment into action? Any questions about any of this so far? Okay, next slide. So what I try to do here is take some of those books and kind of distill them down to a couple questions that get at what they're trying to do. And for me, the first question is, what activity do you engage in that makes your senses come alive? I remember when I was first out of college back in '83, my roommate and I went down to Pensacola to take a job for this guy who had a newspaper there in Florida. And he promised us we would be newspaper writers and editors and photographers. And it was a very interesting opportunity for us. So we moved down there, and turned out the guy didn't really have any structure for us. He just wanted us to come, and he was going to try to figure out and, build a plane as we were flying. And one thing he gave me to do was to go into the dark room. And he had equipped this dark room, which at the time was one of the first that allowed people to develop their own film in color, because before people were usually doing black and white. And I would go into that dark room in the morning around, say, 8 o'clock, and just start developing film. And invariably, and it's never really got old for me, before I knew it, it was 11, 12 o'clock, time for lunch. And I had just gotten so lost in developing this film and just watching it come alive, print after print after print, that time just seemed to evaporate. And this is what I mean by making your senses come alive, where you're just kind of so invigorated in the five senses, not necessarily all five. I mean, if I'm in the dark room, I'm not eating anything, so my sense of taste is not coming alive. But my sense of vision, seeing things, smelling things. I could smell the film and the chemicals, the touch of the paper, and sliding the paper through the water. All those things came alive for me. And I realized that I had a real passion for this work around photography. Next slide. So my questions continue. What activity do you engage in that makes time seem to disappear? And that's the one I just described. And I think most of us have found ourselves in this state of what they call flow, where you're doing something and you can just block out all distractions. You know, sometimes you may start, a simple one would be email. You know, it's easy to get just buried in email. And I know on occasions I've said, I'm going to get this email basket cleaned out. If it kills me, I'm going to get down to 0. And I have got my email down to 0. And to do that takes an enormous amount of concentration and focus, because the things are coming in as you're clearing them out, right? But when you get that deeply engaged in something, you can just forget that time is even ticking. And the caveat I have here is that often people are worried that what they're drawn to or what their passion is may not really matter to other people. It may be insignificant. And I'm saying it doesn't matter if other people don't understand why the activity is important to you, as long as you're informed and know why it's important to you, or you might even know why. You just know that you have this real passion and kind of natural inclination to do it, and do it well, and do it without distraction. And I think you're probably onto something that can make a difference for you, and you can do it and make a difference for the world. Am I making sense in this part of the work? Any questions coming up? Okay. Let's go on to the next slide, Michaela. So here's our first break. I want to give you 15 minutes to spend with yourself, just thinking about where your passion is and what makes you come alive and what tickles your senses, and you can get into without worrying about time, or you can get into so deeply that you look up and an hour has passed or 20 minutes have passed. Doesn't matter. Like I said, if it makes sense to anybody except you. And it doesn't have to be one thing. It could be 2 or 3 things. It could be many things. I know that I've read that people who are, I think they call polyglots, they have these type of brains where they can be just excellent in a lot of things. They can be multilingual. They can be good writers. They can be good speakers. They can draw and sing, dance. So don't feel like it's limited to just to one thing. But if you do have one, maybe you can flesh out, what about that is so compelling for you, and what about it tickles your senses and makes you tick as you go along. So let's say we're going to spend 15 minutes, and when we come back, thinking we can spend maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes in a group, the big group, just hearing from people what they discovered about this 15-minute time. And if you like, you can cut your video off and work without distraction of others. Okay, so let's come back. It's 5:50. Let's come back at 6:05. Any questions before we start? All right, we're back. How was that for everybody? Thumbs up. Let me get my view so I can see the whole screen. Let's see, standard. I'm not seeing everybody. Gallery. Okay. Close mine. All right. Well, I want to hear from you all on what you made of the time. Was that enough time? Was it too much time? And what did you all discover about yourselves? And don't all speak at once. Somebody unmute and let us hear from you.
I'll get us started.
Okay.
One of the, I can't say that I really discovered anything that was new or surprising to me, but it reminded me of what it was that I liked so much about being a medical school professor for over 30 years and what kept me engaged. And that was, I really enjoyed thinking about ways to facilitate learning. I was more of a learning facilitator than I was a teacher. And I particularly enjoyed working with small groups and a seminar type formats, small groups that were geared around problem solving, skill acquisition and application, providing each other with feedback and things of that sort. And I enjoyed everything about it, from the planning and the research to the development to the application and just the opportunity that it provided me to be able to hear from my learners and to watch them grow and experiment with new ways of thinking and to experiment with new ways of behaving and acting in the world and thinking about their place in medicine.
Well, sounds like you hit the gifts and graces jackpot. If you love everything about it, the way you described it. I mean, it sounds like it was just yesterday that you were doing it. You're so thorough in it.
I miss it.
Hey, I'm Dave.
You're Dave.
Exactly
What do you mean by that? You're Dave. You just like Dave?
Planning, researching, teaching, helping people learn discovering new ideas, helping people learn them. I think that's why I'm so passionate about RE. But it also makes me realize how much I hate the crap that goes with it.
With RE?
No.
Oh.
Well,
Go ahead, Dave.
Joel, as far as I'm concerned, the crap is the ticket for admission.
Yeah, although I think at some point you have to question if you're not spending all your money on admission and none of it on the show.
Yeah.
I'll add one that Joan and I share together, and that's a passion for parenting and grandparenting. We just have great satisfaction in partnering together to make it happen for our kids and our grandchild. And that's been just an incredibly fulfilling part of both of our lives.
You feel called to that, Tom?
Was that Kalani?
You feel a call to that type of being with your children and grandchildren?
Yeah, I do. I think we both do. When we met each other and dated and got married, we didn't realize we wanted to have children, but we didn't realize what a passion that would be. That how every age has been fun, challenging and fun, and it's just been so rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
So I like to blow stuff up. Iconoclasty is my specialty. I like to call the BS out and do it in a way that other people can participate in the process of replacing the old with the new, with the present. That's kind of been a specialty most of my life. I've looked for ways to do that in various places and institutions that I've been a part of, and in my personal life as well, to not get too fixed, but to keep the flow going. And I like to challenge authority to explain itself. I will accept the explanations if they make sense, but I want them to, I want it to be explained. I don't want it just to be taken for granted that that's the way it is. So, yeah, I like to blow stuff up.
Bruce, I'm wondering, how did you see that as a gift or a talent? How do you turn it into something that makes the world better? I'm sure you
Well,
have. I just wanted.
I think that it makes the world better to not take things for granted, to not take things as being, well, that's just the way, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. You know, people of color are just less than people that are white, because that's just the way it is. You know, and people who have same-sex partners, there's just something wrong with them. You know, and you know, people that are poor, there's this, they must have done something wrong to be poor. You know, and how did that happen? You know, is it a curse? What is it? You know, we need to be making war, because that's the way we bring peace in the world, is by making war. You know, those are ideas that I was taught, and I challenged them to explain themselves. How does making war make peace? I don't understand that. So I asked people to explain it to me, and if it was a good explanation, then I would say, oh, okay, well, that makes a certain amount of sense. But so the thing for me is that I think that there has to be the guy pointing at the emperor who has no clothes on. And I like being that guy. I like pointing at the naked emperor and saying, excuse me, you know, I don't think so. This doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And because I got to work with 3-year-olds, I got to teach them how to do that too, which was really fun. I taught a lot of 3-year-olds to point at the emperor as well, to say, this, explain this to me. Even though you're a grown-up, and grown-ups aren't supposed to have to explain things to children, explain it to me anyway. And I carried that into my work today, because today I deal with families, with people who are dying, and they want to know what's going on. And I ask the hard questions, or help them. I empower them to ask the hard questions for themselves. So I see all that stuff as being beneficial, and it gives me a feeling of completeness.
Okay. Okay.
It's very beneficial, Brooks.
Anybody else? Thank you, Brooks. Others?
I
Tamara?
would. I like to go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mine would be, I like that I have the ability to walk up to anyone and talk to them.
Yes.
Sure.
I do, because, and I know that sometimes I talk to people that don't want to talk to me. You can look at them in their face, and I know that they're saying, go away. But what happens, because I feel that it's genuine in my heart, what happens is that they eventually talk, and the release in their face, the transformation is something that I just love. I mean, it does something for me, not because I made them talk. Yeah, because I made them talk, because I love people and I like talking to them. And I don't realize sometimes when I start the conversation that this person doesn't want to talk to me for whatever reason. But eventually the communication opens and the conversation goes, because you never know who needs that talk. Was that a thought process that you were going through that maybe you needed that interruption? And I think that the spirits send me to people that I need to talk to make them feel at ease. So that's one of my joys or gifts, I can say. I'm going to say that's a gift.
That's why I'm recruiting you to work on hospitality.
Well, I can tell you, we went to IHOP this morning for our Veterans Day breakfast, and Cameron talked to everybody in the whole restaurant. All right. Well, your gift does brighten up the world. I can attest to that. And I have seen you talk to people who I didn't think would respond, and they were pretty bubbly by the time you all finished. So that's I can validate that one.
Well, it feels good, whether it's good or not. It feels good to me. Thank you for listening.
Takes a long time to get out of the restaurant though. Next.
Well, I discovered in this thought process that I like to learn. At the kind of at the root of it all is a pretty strong curiosity. And so that has reflected itself in such diverse things as gardening, woodworking, fly fishing, and listening to music. And so all those things I have discovered that I'm just opening up the door to a whole adventure in learning. And I like to learn, whether it's reading or on the internet or talking to people.
Mhm.
So that's how I spend a lot of my time. And I don't think, I mean, the bar that you said, Kalani, about something that is a true calling, I mean, I don't know what the bar was. I didn't come up with anything that I thought was that critical. The only thing that I know I like to do is, some of you may remember the book Blue Highways.
Yep.
You remember that?
Yes.
Well, the idea is that if you don't take the beaten path, you learn a lot. And if you don't go on the freeway, but you go on the side road, you're often going to learn more than if you stay on the freeway. And so I have known for my life that I was a Blue Highways guy. And I like Blue Highways. In fact, I take them. Even last time I went across country, I didn't take freeways. I took all Blue Highways, and it took about the same amount of time. Maybe I was off by a half a day or something like that, but it was well worth it.
Yeah, I remember when you came to Las Cruces, you talked about going out to Vado and over to Anthony on the back roads
Right.
off of I-10 instead of taking I-10 and exploring down there, and how interesting it was to you.
Yeah.
And I could say, John, that having you as a service associate has been a way that we have got to know you, and because you reflected on the learnings that you have. So you have brought that to the church in a powerful way.
Well, thank you, Kalani. I just had an email conversation with Maggie Losatelli and told her that now that I've served for about a year on the board, I think I want to get back into being a service associate.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Me too.
All right. Anyone else? I see Susan smiling. You have something you want to say?
Not really. I think the things that give me enormous amounts of joy are, as Tom said, my grandchildren. And I can play with them for hours. I don't know where the time goes, but we have a good time. And then doing things that are in some sense creative, whether it's needlework or writing or whatever. And when I think about those kinds of creative things, I realize that the aspect of them that is really, really fun for me is solving whatever problem is in the creation. I see Peggy nodding, yeah. And so if for example, if I have to write something, or if I want to write something, the issue is, what am I going to write? And then how am I going to structure what I write? And those are the problems that have to be solved. And I can start working, writing and work on those things as I write. And then at some point, I realize I've solved the problem. I know how to structure whatever it is I'm writing. I know where the argument's going to go. I know how I'm going to end it. And the rest of it is just work. So the rest of it isn't as much fun, even though when I'm writing, I don't have to worry about style or grammar. Those kind of just happen. The writing does itself. And then you're really kind of in the zone, you know, you really flow. And that is is wonderful. You can spend hours that way and never know it. But then that's part of solving the problem. And once that's done, it's just drudgery. It's just boring. It's not as much fun. I want another project. And so the other thing that I'm reminded of is something my daughter said. Elizabeth is an extraordinarily talented girl. She sings, writes, plays all kinds of instruments. She acts, she dances, all this. And I said to her once, you're so talented. How do you manage this? And she said, well, the deal is you have to have a talent for having talent. And I thought that was such an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know how to use your talents. You have to know how to find them. You have to be talented in that way.
Mm-hmm. We should have had her teach this class then.
She could.
All right, let's go on to the next slide. Thanks, Susan. I appreciate that. All right, so the next question I have for discernment is, if there were one thing you could do for the world, regardless of pay, status, worrying about what others thought or otherwise, what would you be doing with your time that provided fulfillment? So I'm trying to get you now to just drill down to the one thing. It sounds like several of you have named it. Dave talked about teaching and facilitating in the medical school, and Joel talked about it. Susan just gave us a brilliant example of how do you manage that talent so you can get to the one thing, I guess, eventually. So this is a question I want you to think about. Just can you boil it down to one thing that you could do for the world? Next slide. Michaela? There it is. Okay. And the next question along with that would be, how would you go about making this reality, given the opportunity? So I often ask myself, and I'm sitting around doing something or trying to decide whether to do it or not, or sometimes if I want to purchase something that I think will serve some purpose for me, I ask myself, well, would I do that if there were no obstacles for me to do it? You know, whether it would be to, take a course or to buy another fishing rod, which Tamara can attest to. I don't think too hard about that one. What would I do if I didn't have anything stopping me from doing it, knowing that it was gonna bring about some good? And I believe this could be applied to your gifts and your talents. Because often I hear people who feel like they're holding back, or they have gone through life and they regret not pursuing some idea or some fantasy or some line of work that they felt they were born to do. I was talking to Julie Sanchez, who's with us today, and I was telling her that when I was in seminary, I found people who were just the opposite of that. I had seminary classmates who were in their 80s, in their 70s. Some of them were third, fourth career, and they had just gone from this one thing to the next one thing and to the next one thing. And truly they were life learners, but they had this sense maybe of what Susan is saying of how to manage their talent. And when one thing seemed to be fulfilled, they could go on to the next. Next slide. So we have one more individual time here, and I want to invite you now to give some discernment to the one thing you could do or want to do, and how would you make it happen? So that does entail some sense of being able to get to that one thing pretty quickly. But if you don't have the one thing right now, perhaps you can think of maybe a couple things and then peel one off, but focus on just one, say, objective or talent that you want to make known to the world in a visible way that you haven't done already. Or maybe you have done it and you might want to repurpose it in some other form for the world. So I'm gonna give you 10 minutes for this. We'll come back at 6:36 and we'll hear from a few people on what they have discerned in the 10 minutes. Any questions before we go? Okay, thank you. Righty. We're back from 10 minutes of discerning about the one thing and how you would make it happen. I wonder if we could hear from a couple people who haven't spoken. Annetta, John Kraus, or Mark Hohenstrider.
I'd like to say something.
Sure.
I'm John, and I don't know you, many of you personally. I've met several of you, but I have a question. First of all, what was that music you were playing?
The music is from a CD called Buddha Bar.
Buddha Bar?
Yes. And Michaela could probably send a link to it. It's a compilation that comes out every so often with a new set of music.
Okay, well, I like it. And my wife has given my entire family who's coming for Thanksgiving the task of submitting something they really like.
Okay.
And that's on our list from me.
I was thinking the same thing. That music was so good. I hate to see it get cut off.
Yeah. So.
Oh, tomorrow night is the jazz at the university, everyone. Don't forget.
Oh, good. So I'd like to share if I can. I didn't share in the first time. I went through about 5 scenarios, 5 things that I really like doing that are really important to me. And then in this particular segment, I brought it down to 1. And what I said would really work for me is sharing images and stories of the wonderful places I've been able to see and people I've been able to meet over time, because it's been such an adventure. I've been retired 11 years, and when I retired 11 years ago, I had 3 goals: learn to be a better birder, learn to be a fly fisher, and be a photographer. All of them were relatively new to me. 2 of them have dropped off and photography is left. And I've taken a couple of classes with National Geographic. I'm not a very good photographer, by the way. I consider myself an enthusiast, but if I could share the things that I've been able to see, and new things are coming up all the time. I like that, and telling stories about it and talking to people. And so what I'd have to do to get to a point where I could do that, let's see, what is the last part of it? How would you make it happen? I practice with my camera and get to know it better, and get to know processes better, because I'm still an amateur or enthusiast. I like to talk to people like Tamara, and I don't know that I'm quite as outgoing as you are, Tamara, but I'm pretty social, and I really enjoy listening to people. In particular, I have a background in mental health, and so listening and talking with people is fun for me. And then the other thing I'd need to know is I can make great stories about the people I meet because I listen well. I'm not as good making stories about nature and some of the things that I see. So like the other day I think I saw a Mexican wolf in my backyard here in Las Cruces, and I looked it up on the web, and they have been here. So I don't know if it could have been a coyote, but it was a big one. So anyway, that's kind of what I'd like to do.
Awesome. Annetta, what about you? Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Anything you want to share with us?
Well, I found out that, what I'm usually drawn to is things I can do by myself. I don't really like to hang around with people if I don't have to. But, you know, since you put in there that it should be something that is good for the world, I'm going like, oh my God, that is a heavy weight to put on one's shoulders. You know, I can barely take care of myself. So looking back on, you know, what I have been doing, you know, throughout my life, it was usually just things I personally enjoyed, you know, just for myself kind of thing. But I, you know, went to university to become a translator, an interpreter, and, you know, studied foreign languages. So that is kind of like maybe something that I could go back to, help people communicate, avoid misunderstandings, because it seems to me that that's where sometimes conflicts start amongst peoples on this planet. And then when you kind of try to go back and unravel, you know, that the whole thing, it was, you know, one misinterpreted word, and you're going like, well, who in the heck, you know, picked the wrong word out of that dictionary? So yeah, maybe after 45 years of doing taxes, that's probably where my talents are best spent.
I'd like to make just a very quick observation, if I may. And I respect everything you have just said, Annetta, but I would just like to point out that you are the one person in our congregation that I know who has never seen an auction event that you didn't want to be part of.
Well, yeah. I mean, are you kidding? That's where the chocolate hangs out.
Okay, well, we're running low on time here. I think we probably can go maybe 5 over. We have another group that's meeting at 7. They're probably going to take over this Zoom link in about 10 to 15 minutes. So why don't we go to the next slide? I still want to hear from Mark and Shirley if they're so inclined. So the next slide we have is to talk about the talent that you'd like to develop and how you might share that talent with the church. And I believe that we could probably use this time without breaking out and give people who would like to talk. I know most of you are pretty generous with your time and sharing it with the church already, but maybe there's some things that you might want to reconsider. John talked about returning to the Service Associates Sunday Services team, Sunday Services Committee. And so we have, let's say we have 5 minutes roughly before we have to split the scene. And I know that I haven't heard from Shirley or Mark. So would you all like to, do you have anything that you would like to share with the group? Either one of you?
This is Mark. Hello. I have two talents. One is a work talent and the other is my art talent. And my work talent is a background in not-for-profits and finance and administration. And so I've just started helping the finance committee however I can. But that's been a great deal of interest to me. The other is my art. And for example, in the auction, I donated 2 hours of my time to discuss art with somebody and to create, make observations about their art and share where I am and share where they might be going. But that's just one little way that I shared my talent with the church in this last auction. The other way is that I'm looking forward to other auctions where I can donate pieces. and I'd be tickled to do that. So I'm actually looking forward to the next auction. Anyway, that's what Mark has to say.
Awesome.
Well, what I would say is that I really, when you asked the second question, I thought, oh my God, I loved working with one kid, student on one person on one, and reading with them. It was just so rewarding. So, and I have done taxes, and talking to the person, the client that I'm working with, that's really rewarding also. But the kids are important. I don't know that there's any kids at our church that need to spend some time reading with an adult, but that's something that I think I'll reach out to some of the teenagers who maybe aren't going to school. And it would be fun to be with them, do something.
Awesome. Awesome. Anybody have any burning sharing they want to do before we kind of wrap it up?
I think
Lonnie, one thing that this class so far has done is it's made me realize how important the time I spend doing things with RE, how important that is to me, and why I need to do more.
All right, excellent. Excellent.
I have a comment, Kalani. I appreciate this class. I went out and bought myself a notebook, and I'm starting to write things in the notebook from the class. And I'm optimistic it's something I can stick with. I'd be happy to help in the future with pictures or anything like that you need.
Okay.
Also, I've helped Susan a little bit with when she was working with the migrants coming across. And I volunteered recently to help, I think it's Jan, with the, what do they call it? Familiarizing the Afghanis to our country when they come in. And I don't know if that counts as an activity in the church, but I assume there's an association since I'm working with one of the people that's taken the lead on it.
Sure.
Yes,
Mark,
that's
Reeves?
through social justice, John. Yeah.
Social justice. Okay. Yeah. And I just, that's a really, it's not, that part's not photography, obviously, but I think it's really important.
Okay. I agree.
I also think that it's really important that when we engage in activities such as the one that John just described and what Shirley is talking about, that somehow we let people know that part of our motivation for doing that comes from our commitment to our Unitarian Universalist values. And as a way to, I mean, we're not a proselytizing denomination at all, but we shouldn't hide our denominational lights under that proverbial basket and let people know that one reason why we're doing these things is because we are UUs and we want to live the values that we are learning and being reinforced by being UUs.
Right on.
Great.
Okay, we'll go to our next slide. Any leftover questions? Okay, next slide. Well, our third and final section will be next Tuesday at 5:30. We're going to talk about treasure and how treasure relates to stewardship. So I invite you to come back and bring someone with you and keep thinking about your time and your talents between now and then. Next slide. We're out of here.
Thank you.
Lonnie,
Bye,
I'd
everybody.
like to point out that Peggy and I got double the value for our bandwidth.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Instead of one person per line, we got two people on one bandwidth.
there you go. All right. Okay. Guess we're doubling up. We'll see you all next time. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.